The scariest things to me are reading almost all public intelligence, open source intelligence on what someone can send to a cell phone with even the state-of-the-art apps and do things to your phone that you don't intend. So like, I'm a person that, one, because of the first example I cited as emerging threat, I'm very careful what apps I let pop up notifications in my face, even one or two. And two, I tamper down even the apps that are supposed to be secure enough and make them not so friendly to me. Because anything that I can lazily do when I'm not paying attention is a threat to me, whether I'm a government employee or one of my family members. Like, you pressing a button these days can actually mess you up. So I put friction in my own life, so I have to think about pressing buttons, which is an ironic full circle comment for a hot take about emerging threats from a cybersecurity expert who tells others how to do it. I have to protect me from myself.
Friends, family, enemies, frenemies. This is the Paramify podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Scott. And here we go again. Another great podcast in store for you. And this one's really good. We're going to get unfiltered AJ Stein today. AJ and I became fast friends at an OSCAL event. What was it? About a year and a half ago? A little bit ago?
Yep.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So AJ is awesome. He works at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. He's an IT Cybersecurity Specialist there.
Correct.
And he's been to all the prestigious colleges that have the name George in them, right? So Georgetown, that's where you did your bachelor's, and then you went to Georgia Tech. Led you to some technical roles at Georgetown, and then finally InfoSec engineering roles in the private sector. Finally, here you are serving the public. And we were just talking today. It's just AJ we're talking to, right?
That is correct. I don't represent the U.S. government, NIST or Commerce or anyone when you hear all my unfiltered thoughts. This is AJ doing AJ things to be as scientific as possible about it.
Yeah. So, dude, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, my friend. I'm pumped for this one. Have you ever done a podcast before? Like, how many?
It is funny you asked that, Kenny. I actually have a friend where I attempted 3 or 4 years ago to make a podcast. And if he's listening, Arash, this is on you. It got taken down and we never finished it and we never continued it because Unfiltered AJ and one of his colleagues were just how we prefer to do podcasts. So yes, this is not technically my first podcast experience.
All right. So yeah, you got your caffeine. Where are you today?
I am visiting family in the great state of New Jersey, where I was raised. Nice. Jersey. Okay, so what is your allegiance in terms of sports teams? Do you have any, or do you not even care? Or do you... I'm what you would probably call a traditional nerd, Kenny. Sports ball is interesting. You can pick whatever sports ball you want. As a child, I did pretend that I was very dialed into the baseball teams and football teams of we like to call it the tri-state area, if you're not familiar. And, I vacillated between the New Jersey and New York teams. And after a whole childhood and a good portion of my life filled with disappointment and regret, I don't really follow any of the sports teams anymore. I'm like one of those classic nerds. Yes, I know they exist. Can I talk about them for 30 seconds and embarrass myself? It will be much faster that I embarrass myself with football, baseball, or any of the sports than cybersecurity. It's like I haven't watched them for 20 years because I basically have not.
Yeah, man. The one thing, so I have 5 kids, and I grew up. I played soccer and baseball, and growing up, and I didn't really love baseball. Sorry, I'm gonna probably offend everybody here, but man, I didn't like it. When I was 12 years old, that was the last time I was on an organized baseball team. We went to Hawaii for a travel team, and
very cool.
It was cool. It was all right. I like Hawaii. It was all right. But I remember wanting to be at the beach, and they're like, "Hey, Scott, do you want to pitch?" And I'm like, "All right, yeah, I'll go out there." And I remember I threw the ball as hard as I could. It started pouring, just pouring in it. And so I just threw as hard as I could. I mean, 12-year-old, and just being the kid in the back, and he did the whole. He turned around and it hit him right in the back, and he started crying. And I was like, all right. And then it kept pouring more, and they didn't stop the game. And then I threw it again. I did the next thing, and it's the same kid got hit in the back, and he did the same thing and started crying, and they pulled me out. And then the rain stopped. The sun shone on the mound there in Hawaii, and I never played baseball again. And
It's funny to me that apparently you needed continuous monitoring as a 12-year-old in the sports team before you even knew what cybersecurity was. That's fascinating.
Yep, I did. And you know what? I guess I like the Giants. My dad loves the Giants.
Wow.
In
okay.
baseball. And so I'll tune into a game, but sometimes I was talking to people, hey, so we're gonna take some clients to a baseball game, and I'm like, that I don't drink, and so I just kid. I don't know. I can't.
I don't know. Like as an adult, drinking aside, I probably will offend more people than you. 12 innings. It's still 12 innings of baseball, right? That's almost too slow for me.
Oh, 12 innings? Is that how it is in the East Coast? It's 9 innings, dude.
Oh, see,
it's 9 innings.
Remember when I told people will be like, so he legitimately does so much computer stuff that he lives under a rock. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I was being very serious. 9 innings.
Yeah.
Go
So
sports ball.
Yeah. So you've been vetted. You're a complete nerd, and I freaking love it. So your journey is kind of a ride through the cybersecurity cosmos. So what's the weirdest? Yeah. So what's the weirdest and most unexpected twist you've encountered along the way? Maybe it's a long time ago. Maybe it's recent.
Well, it's funny. It depends on whether how we qualify. Words are words. What is secure? What's not secure? What's cybersecurity? What's not just a 9-to-5 job where you copy paste? Don't know. I actually was an IT person, and I say IT person because it wasn't cybersecurity focused for about 6 years in, I believe Americans call it Qatar. I call it Qatar because before I was a computer person, I was an Arabic language major in college, and I spent most of my time using computers to write papers or learn how to pretend like I was an authentically native speaker, probably not now. And yeah, I ended up working in the IT department of a US university's campus there. So I'm pretty sure a lot of how I got there and the things that happened there for 6 years, again, ironically, shout out to all the people. At that time, it was SFSQ IT, Andre Bernard, I Missed the Basement. Or also Mohammed and Bilal. All these people, we eventually got moved into a basement, just like all the stereotypes in a totally different country. It was like, I was telling a friend, it transcends language and culture. Like the IT people being these weird pod people that exist not for real view is a thing. So people used to also come down and they heard I spoke a little Arabic. So Qatari kids and other Arab expats would come up with computer problems that were not very severe just to see like I was a trained circus event if I would talk to them. And then eventually I would avoid it and then snap at them and go, I'm not a toy that belongs to you. And they would take a picture and they'd laugh. Most IT people don't have that problem.
Whoa. So doing technical things in a second language. So I speak Spanish, but it's like very conversational, and like I mean I could speak it and I can understand, but like if we talk about cars or if we talk about like anything technical, I'm just like, dude.
It will be funny if the people who know if they could comment, they'd be like, AJ, let's be serious. To be fully clear, Georgetown and all the places in Doha, they were part of a complex in Arabic and English called Education City. English was the primary language for everybody. Just the American people were, on average, the ones who spoke the fewest number of languages. I worked with some Egyptian contractors, and since I knew Egyptian Arabic, on the side, a lot of colorful commentary occurred, not in English. And when I would use technical terminology I learned in college that was correct, they would laugh at me because it was like, they're like, no one says the board of keys. They call it keyboard, just like you do. Chill out. But they thought it was fun, and we had a great time. You also find out computers really don't like being left in the back of expensive SUVs where the average temperature is like 130 degrees. So even if they're sleeping, they actually they don't break as much as they start acting real weird. It's basically when you dehydrate a human being, you can do that with a computer.
Okay. So like, okay, they act really weird. How weird. Okay. So, all right. So all right, man. So if you could describe let's do this, man. If you could describe your career using a movie title, what are you gonna call it?
I can't believe I'm gonna do this. I bet you I'm gonna regret it, because later on, if I ever look for a job, people will be like, when I looked up your name, we found a podcast where you said the title of the fake movie representing your symbolic career would be "Fake It Till You Make It," and that basically, I tell people this spiel. I've told them countless times. So, "Fake It Until You Make It" would be the title. I was a linguistics major who took some computer science classes, and I was freshman year of college, the kind of kid who had a couple friends, but before my freshman year, got sick of Windows. I just couldn't handle it. And people who know me know I've been like, not since early teenage, but like late teenage years, I've been like a Linux fan, and I was tweaking away, like, because this was in the olden times, and now I feel really old because even the Linux community won't know anything about this. Like, we had to use NDIS wrapper to take like Windows Wi-Fi drivers and make them, like, transplant them into a Linux operating system. So I recently looked this up. I used a version of Ubuntu that's like one of the single digit versions, because like, even despite looking like the youthful face of government, I was that far ago. And that kind of like transitioned to me working in IT at Georgetown as the guy who moved paper. So that was legitimately my job. And then they're like, okay, you don't complain, not to speak ill of my coworkers that were student employees. I don't remember their names anymore, not to name names and embarrass them, but they're like, you don't find excuses not to move paper into the student printer labs and act too hungover. We're going to give you more and more responsibility. So I moved into writing web applications that remotely monitored the printers, to Windows network administration. I became a Georgetown University contractor after I graduated in 2008. Economically, it wasn't a good time for a lot of people. I briefly pivoted into non-IT things, came back, and did IT stuff in Georgetown's campus in DC, and then moved over to the Doha campus. I did help desk and system management things for many years. I was like the guy who used VB script for the younger part of the community. There was this thing that existed before PowerShell. It was called Visual Basic or VB script. VB script was the subset of it. No one misses that at all.
Oh,
you miss
dude.
it?
Oh man, dude, the Paramify, dude.
Oh, you're kidding.
Our prototype. Okay. My prototype was built in Visual Basic because, like, it had all the libraries, right?
There you go.
For Word. Come on, man.
I mean, later on in life, it was very triggering that I ended up at a military contractor. No, I don't think I'm going to be talking out of school. They're not the only one. Some still use VB.net for web applications. And part of it is scary to me because that sometimes is more readable to me than modern, heavily genericized C#. So other people will roll their eyes. Part of my fake it till you make it journey is that I did a lot of coding later on, but like no one proudly talks about their VB, like VB.net is like not something you'd be proud of. OG VB script. You used Visual Basic. VB script was like the scripting engine that you used to manage Windows because PowerShell wasn't a thing. I was around when Vista came out, and that was also, how can I put this politely, because this is a podcast and we don't want to edit out profanity. Interesting. So yeah. And then I ended up doing more security stuff over time.
Yeah. Well, I had experience with that because I did applications in Lotus and that was like,
yay.
I'm proud of I majored in Excel, man. That's
majored,
my bag.
Okay, but you can say that, but did you actually major in it?
No. But,
okay, well, let's be clear. Okay.
I mean, I wish that I feel like I have the equivalent. I'll get an honorary degree one day. There's going to be a faction of Excel nerds and Visual Basic nerds. They've always had a place in my heart. Come on.
Now, I actually respect. I mean, like, let's talk about, I don't know sports ball. I actually, off the record, again, I am an employee of a government agency, and I've pitched this idea internally numerous times, knowing no one will allow it. But there is an e-sport for the people of my ilk who don't understand the sports that involve people physically excelling. We need to find a way to make computer time in chairs athletic somehow. My son will be super offended by this analysis, but there's like the Excel Olympics that happened in Vegas a few months ago. I've wanted security automation nerds to go head to head with Excel athletes until like our tools can basically destroy them. That's the final step in talking about automation tools, when you can outdo an Excel nerd with that heavily, like with macros and very tight VBA. Then you know that you're legit, because until then no one cares. And you could make competitions about that called like Security Insanity Olympics.
I'm putting it on the record right now. Paramify will sponsor your squad, and I want to be an advisor. I'll sponsor. Let's do it.
Sum alls, all caps.
Oh my gosh.
Sum alls. It would just be, I've dreamed of this, but like realistically, a government agency can't do it. I actually am interested though, like if you could track, because like a lot of people, when you work on data standards or building tooling, it doesn't start faster than Excel. The Excel people still have an advantage. But eventually, if we talk about some of the other things I've worked on, like when I was in NIST, I was the technical director for the OSCAL program for about a year, like 9 months. I wonder if you could show the incremental gains until like the Excel people we don't like this special event. None of us are going to that anymore. It's too humiliating. Because that to me would be victory. Now, you can't really do that as a federal agency. You can't run, I guess, what I'll call the equivalent of, for people who are too into movies like me, the Ocho and Dodgeball. I don't think that you could actually have a government agency running a Excel Olympics event, but I can dare to dream.
Hey, you should. I think that sounds super interesting because, I mean, here's the thing with like any modern web application, we're dealing with it with some of some of the vendors that we're using, every now and again. A lot of them start like just as like geniuses that understand a thing, and they have their Excel sheet. And so what they're trying to do is put their Excel sheet into a SaaS application and make it more usable. But the challenge is how do you make it more usable? Because a lot of times there's so much domain expertise that goes into however it's done. And that's really the challenge with modern applications. People want things just to work. And when you have so many constraints and cells, and it's just like, makes it really hard. So people, I think that's why spreadsheets and Excel is just such an incredible invention, because you can create an application that works really, really fast. And I don't know, it's great, but I don't know.
Long ago, to be clear, before NIST was even an option for me, and before I was like a government cybersecurity contractor, I was close to obtaining a job with a finance company. So I won't name them by name, and it's been a long time, because I'll tell the best anecdote I ever heard, which is the cyber people there were like, you'll encounter problems with us that you wouldn't encounter anywhere else. Microsoft support, when we paid them, told us that we had the third largest spreadsheet in the world for figuring out some of our derivatives. So when we would have to put it on a network share, and people would touch it. And they were like, because there was some modeling we were doing that's like some of the oldest of the company, and they reached a point where they crashed it and they couldn't open it, and it was huge. And it was like the third biggest spreadsheet in the world that Microsoft claimed they've seen. Now, I don't know if Microsoft was blowing smoke or that was true, but it's weird that actually intrigued me. Like, I still think about that, not seeing it and having to figure out how to do binary surgery on the XML blobs. And like for people who know, Excel spreadsheets are like crazy all the way down. It's a zip file, like when you compress stuff, and inside there's XML, and then there's like all this binary encoded stuff. I was like, my one shot at doing like open heart surgery on one of the world's most intensive Excel files, gone. I'll always think about it.
The derivatives. So I know exactly what you're talking about, because like the other side of me is like, I was really interested in hedge funds, even started one, and I did derivatives and all that stuff, right? So I love that stuff. So I don't know. I think we're going to lose everybody if we keep talking about it, because really, your day-to-day is cybersecurity.
Yes.
The constant game of whack-a-mole. What's the most absurd? Oh gosh, I have these little
fun story about that. Cybersecurity be like that. I work in a government environment, and I actually, to tell you, so people understand that cyber, one of the most humbling things is that you realize that you're not in control and you don't know everything about everything. As reductive as that sounds, one time MacBooks pushed out an update with that, and I thought it was related to a cloud service. So I went to find security officials in my employer and say, who authorized an update to the cloud service to allow that? And after a week, someone's like, oh no, that's like Mac OS does that for you. And I sheepishly told them, well, I figured it out and told them, and they're like, thank you. And I'm like, yeah, it was kind of humiliating, but I'm annoyed that that kind of stuff would come up in government meetings. Someone said like, congratulations, and it was confetti everywhere. And I was so annoyed that I'm like, I want someone to understand you can't deploy this in certain situations. But even I, cybersecurity specialist person, couldn't perceive that was going to happen and couldn't control it when it did. So that, by the way, for everyone who's new or very veteran to cybersecurity, that's like the whole thing in a nutshell. I feel very passionately about it. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. Just like what are some of the reactions? Yeah, so we can. I hate these. You can do those.
But you can. This is funny. Like, I, in my personal life, don't use Mac computers. I'm a hardcore Linux person, and I'm not doing this on a Mac computer. So I assume I can't do this. See, it does nothing. That's the power of choice.
Yeah. I just turned it off, right? So I have to turn the...
Am I truly the most unpolished guest you've had that I've inspired you to actually create a reaction by accident? Am I the first one?
No, I don't know. I'm like trying to like figure out this. Yeah, I like mess something up. Whatever. I
love that this could be so representative of the kind of episode that I would enjoy and no one else would, where we talk about like iOS or Mac settings and then talk about like what their implications are. And that's like what the job actually is. Googling how this one toggle switch can destroy your phone or a whole network. That's it.
Or just bring the freaking U.S. economy to its knees. Right?
Oh, come on. I don't know what you're talking about. I feel like there's a prescient example you're going to bring up, but I'm going to repeat as an individual. Whatever, things happen. No one cares about my official opinion about it. But I'll guess.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there may or may not have been. I mean, hey, let's just be clear. This happens to the very, very best in the business, right? Like, it is... Yeah. It is not hard to mess up in security. Cybersecurity, like, all right. So, yeah, it's just so hard to do, right? So if we talk about what happens we're not naming the company.
You can name the company if you want. I don't care. Everyone knows it's a question of whether you want to make this the topic of the next question or not.
Yeah, I just have a lot of respect for the company, right? So it's CrowdStrike, right? I have a ton of respect for those guys. They have really amazing software, right? It's like really good at what it does, but they stepped in it big time, right? And they would admit the same thing, right? So they push out something that it was kind of I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about it.
I haven't read the most recent official write-ups, but I've heard a lot. I gotta tell you, this is also going to make me super popular. I'm so excited. I didn't really think about how this will impact me later when people Google and they find, oh, who's Kenny and why did he interview HA? And then all these things I'm going to say that will negatively impact my career later. It's going to be great. But see, all of you can reach greatness like I have by just unfiltered saying and doing things. That's all it takes.
Yeah. Let's go.
But like, so many people have taught me that LinkedIn is like a cesspool by the reactions that people have to that event and then proffer their advice. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Have you been writing like kernel drivers for the last 10 years? Or have you been writing like user mode components that interact with the kernel? Or have you written a production security system or deployed one in your whole career? Yet you seem to know so well what it's like. It's actually kind of funny. I will say, everything that people had to do to fix it, I used to be the person that managed like disk encryption on hard drives and computers, because I was also the security guy. That like, I laughed, not to speak ill of them. CrowdStrike, you did what you had to do. People on the other side, I have family and friends that work in businesses big and small. I used to be one of those guys that was like, uh-oh, I have 30 people in this building and 20 people somewhere else. I need to find out a way to allow them to decrypt their own hard drive and then walk them through the parts of my job they never intended to do, like deleting sys files out of folders they don't understand. They didn't think I made sense before I used all the complicated non-words, like the letters and the names and things. So I'm familiar with that. But I don't know. Mike's my take on it, like, I'm more surprised that people think that computers blue screening defaults to being a negatively bad behavior. I've listened to a lot of expert people say, like, it's awful. It's like, and I'm not a huge Microsoft fan by default, as we talked about through my childhood. Like, I find it interesting that people think operating systems that receive like a dynamic amount of program or state immediately halting because it doesn't trust what that thing is done is inherently bad, is also, to me, a very weird take on resiliency and security engineering. But most people have that knee-jerk reaction. I don't know what to think about it, because people don't like what I posit. Like, why do you think people design operating systems to shut down when a program accesses memory it shouldn't? People tell me, well, it shouldn't do that. I'm like, that's a really convenient answer, bro, but that doesn't really answer my question.
Perfect. Okay, man. So in your experience, I want to talk about what's the most, let's say, counterintuitive life hack for handling cybersecurity challenges that actually works. Actually works.
I mean, so this is probably a off the cuff, because again, this is AJ. This is AJ, just AJ, and filter time. The new name of this episode, but not the whole podcast. That would be a little too egomaniacal. Yeah. Automation, I believe in, because humans are fallible. Like, I've made mistakes I could talk about to be like humbling, and like AJ can be klutzy at times. Automation is good because it takes humans out of the loop, especially for things that are repetitive or doesn't matter. I didn't really think about it, but I would say checklists are often derided in cybersecurity, and that and as a representative symbol of compliance for the sake of compliance. By the way, completely agree for the audience that that's not good. However, there is certain value to having checklists ready, especially for cybersecurity incidents. And I used to help as a contractor be like the triage team and actually handle incident management when things were escalated in like a large area of a government agency where contractors built a very large public-private API surface and data analysis platform. And having checklists in advance really do prevent you from going off the rails. And if I am not smarter than a pilot and a doctor, I would say really thinking through those and incrementally refining them, from everything to my former colleagues. I'm sorry, I know you used to hate me for this, like pull request checklists and actually checking them off and reading them. Which are other things, big believer.
On that, I think I filled out a ticket using one of your checklists for OSCAL way back in the day. I think so. I think
and you were probably like, this is tedious. And it's like, I agree. But sometimes I want people to realize that when they tell me something's done, I'm like 60% confident it's not all the way done. And that's also for me. Sometimes I've bitten myself that way.
Yeah. So cybersecurity, it kind of evolves really fast. It's like, caffeinated squirrel. It's like super fast, right? So what's your guilty pleasure source for cybersecurity news that you'd be embarrassed to admit?
That I'd be embarrassed to admit? I don't know if I'd be embarrassed to admit anything. I'm kind of like I haven't seen good stuff on TikTok, but so full disclosure, like I don't actually use a lot of things. I'm the most paranoid of my friends. In my personal life, I don't even use an Android phone with like the vanilla thing that Google or your company, for people who don't know, like Google and Samsung, these people make a thing from Google and sometimes they tweak it. I refuse to use that. I use a custom thing. If you're one of those nerds and you're not sports ball like me, I'm a Graphene OS user. I'm one of those privacy nut jobs that you've heard about. I'm very paranoid. So I have an app to occasionally read Reddit when I'm bored. I also I actually participate on mailing lists with local hacker spaces in the Northern Virginia and the DC area. I guess I can shout out to them, the Nova Hackers group. Sometimes they tell me things I don't know about. I didn't finish grad school yet, by the way. I'm like still through it because sometimes AJ gets overwhelmed and classes are hard, even for me. Like the Slack channel, there's a lot of banter, sometimes not about cybersecurity. And I want to name names to be funny, but I won't. Some people are funny, but a lot of things I learned are from there. And so like Reddit, Slack channels from classmates, and I'm all about the orange site. Not all of that is cyber, but if you know what Y Combinator Hacker News is, I spend a lot of time there to learn what are the cool trends or what are the established problems in large-scale systems and software engineering. I don't see a big divide between that and cyber. To me, it's like all the same stuff. So I don't know. I used to spend a lot of time on our programmer humor on Reddit to be inspired by my lack of skill, or the we could have some humility about everything. But I don't think I've learned something from programmer humor. I've just been amused and share with some of my colleagues who are familiar on Signal chats and been like, this feels relatable, right? So,
right. Well, yeah, if you want to know, that's the most interesting people. I like to spend time on those things. The time. So I always try to find as many nerds as possible that I can relate to kind of keep me up to speed. So I'm always like a little bit
right on.
I'm always a little bit behind, so I always ask, I'm like, what should I be doing more of? All right.
I don't know if I have like a really good one. It's like, I let the internet, the grand internet, the wizards of wizards are all these wonderful people who don't have real names on the internet that show me entertaining or informative stuff. I also do LinkedIn. I don't think that's embarrassing. I mean, it's increasingly embarrassing, but I let people curate for me, and then I'm like, I'll start that and read it later. If we're going to talk about embarrassing, aside from cybersecurity, I famously in my friend group and professional group have more tabs open in every browser I've run than anyone I've known, except for one or two other friends. And I'm like the source of mockery because like my browser hangs frequently because there's so much stuff I want to learn. A lot of the tabs, the websites disappear before I get to them. So like people do inbox 0, right? They mark all their email read. I don't do that. I have to do tab 0 every 1 to 2 years. People think that's funny.
Yeah, it is, man. I think I've had, I always do. I'm the same. I have major ADHD, so I'm always, it's so bad, right? Nothing gets done.
There's just too much.
Until I care.
There's just too much. You have to, that's the Zen thing, right? You have to accept it. Like, I'm all about automation because if machines don't manage machines, let's be honest, there's not enough people hours and people or coffee, of which I'm a fairly obvious customer. There's not enough coffee in the world to make that a solvable problem, even if we basically forgo sleep.
Yeah.
Lord knows I've tried in my youth.
Yeah. So you have a lot of experience with automation tools. OSCAL, we'll get into that. GRC automation tools, vulnerability management. So let's click on vulnerability management.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So
I'm feeling vulnerable right now because
is it soul crushing and tedious, or is it secretly exhilarating? What's your take?
I mean, I guess it could be column A, column B. One of the things that's funny to me is, and I didn't know I would be someone working on standards. So I don't think OSCAL is a standard yet. We could unpack that. And NIST makes some things that are standard and not. And I don't officially represent people here. I'm just like saying it as it is. But like one of the things that I was like, wow, I really believe in standards and like their analog in software, which is like heavily adopted de facto standards and open source, is because I spent so much time in different DevSecOps. So for people who don't know, that's where you do all the development, the security, the operations all at the same time, because why have separate people? That costs money, right? In different jobs, I've reinvented many wheels. And I've actually worked with people that have invented very complex wheel factory wheels of security tools around even formats that everyone uses. So that's what got me bought into it. There's like this mundane element to those tools. There's something appealing though. Like I've actually seen real problems in programs devolve because people didn't read 1 or 2 scans. And then I've been part of a Tiger team to fix things after that. But at the same time, I had to tell people, wow, like, why did you build this custom format on top of that? Why didn't you use that? It's like, I didn't know or I didn't care. It's always, sorry, but so you can see I can't. I didn't know, I didn't care, or both. It's always like 1, 2, or 3. It's like a high school entrance exam. So
Okay. That's great. That's great. High school entrance exam. Yeah, that's so funny. So if it were a person, or like what kind of personality would vulnerability management have?
like the tools themselves, the people working on it. I mean, there's like so many. I'm gonna have to think about this. Like TV show references. I don't do sports ball. I do a lot of TV show references. I don't know.
Is it George? Is it Elaine? Is it Kramer?
Wow.
Is it Jerry?
I mean, the beauty.
Is it
I love. By the way, also because it wasn't clear from my coffee cup that and I didn't say I'm living in Jersey right now for the time being and where I grew up. You're like, AJ will find Seinfeld references relatable. Correct. You didn't have to ask, but I'm glad you guessed, much like about my sports proclivities. I don't know, but the beauty of sports. Okay, so sorry, not sports. The beauty of these tools is that it's like schizophrenic, and it's all of them. I've seen, or at the people operating them, I've seen people that are very meticulous. So maybe not Jerry. I'm trying to think about who's like a person that's put together and very quiet in the show. Notice that doesn't make good television. I've seen the full extreme of also Kramer-like people on the other end of the spectrum and everything in between. I guess Newman is a bad case because he's like a postal employee, and we know the stereotypes of our brethren. Full disclosure, one of my relatives was a postal employee for years. I never even asked him if it's on point. But like, none of these things really represent. The tools actually don't actually change the culture of the people operating them. The culture of that org that's buying or making their own tools, and I've seen many people buy things and not use it at all or poorly, does not change the culture. I've been the guy that actually had to build pipelines for all the tools and suck them all up and put them in vulnerability management systems, which I guess like coordination tools. I don't even know if they're still around. This isn't an endorsement, but ThreadFix I used to talk to. Like, I don't even know if that company is around. They've been acquired like 3 times over.
Okay, let's see. ThreadFix.
You knew it was bad when people built applications that were taking and managing outputs of different tools and coordinating them. And I'm like, it's part of Coalfire now. You're kidding.
Coalfire. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
When did that happen? I guess I just showed my age. People are like, read a book, AJ, or a web page. No one reads books anymore, right? So when they started making tools, and I had to also tweak custom open source ones deployed in places, when you had tools that were basically aggregating those things, that was another layer of culture function or culture fail, right? I've seen the whole continuum of Seinfeld, the plot and the characters through vulnerability management.
Okay. So, let's take it. So, vuln management. You've worked a little bit with GRC automation tools, like in your last experience. What's the most like hilarious or like frustrating experience you've had with a GRC automation tool, or like a?
I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. I haven't used a lot of GRC tools. And when I say that, I think most people have a perception that a governance, risk, or compliance tool is like the product that you make, or Exacta, or the EMAS, which is technically made by military people and military and civilian people administer it. It's not. It's GOTS, government off the shelf, which I didn't know was a term until I was a Fed. But like, most of the governance, risk, and compliance tooling I use was not like dedicated web apps or command line tools separate of my time before OSCAL. It was Word and Excel and logging into EMAS. And 2 years of that made me so angry. And you can tell I kind of have a way of exhibiting my frustration or my pleasure with certain things, that's how I ended up in the OSCAL community. The most embarrassing one I'm trying to think about, I often had to, for a long time, I worked in a group that wasn't given a certain amount of permission, or maybe it just EMAS didn't have that as a feature. So if I wanted to update a system security plan for a contractor in the military where I was the application security engineer, I had to go through and click every single thing manually. And I had, in the military, for people who don't know, and I don't think I'm talking out of school, you can't really install custom software that lets you log in as a military contractor and then automate plan through a web browser. Most of the military doesn't have the awareness of that or a sense of humor, let alone the philosophical view going, oh, that helps us get the job done faster. That's okay. So a lot of it was actually trying to hit a save button and the VPN crashing on a contractor laptop and having to start over. That's like one of many times of my worst embarrassing moment with the GRC tool, which was copy and pasting from Excel and Word into a web app. So that's how you know me today. That was so frustrating. I thought I'd waste years of my life trying to inspire the rest of industry. I say waste sarcastically. The jury's out on whether I'm succeeding or not.
I don't think so, man. I think you guys really have done something. I mean, OSCAL like is really something. I think we're past that early adoption phase. It's a thing, man.
Well,
so like love it or hate it, right? I mean, it's great.
Well, I mean, I don't work on it officially anymore. I'm no longer part of the OSCAL team. I work on other data standards. I think OSCAL actually is succeeding. I think it's important that we have early adopters at a beachhead. Mm-hmm. I was always saying, actually, and this is before I was an employee of NIST and Commerce. Again, this is a personal opinion. I said, and I don't mean, because there are colleagues of mine who will go, I hate when AJ compares it to HTML. I said, I will personally, not the people I worked with in the past or people I talk to in the present, the future. I sometimes am involved in OSCAL adjacent software, even in NIST. There are some building block things, right? When we are as ubiquitous as HTML and it's so stable that people rely on it but don't care about it, for me, that's the bar of winning. I've said that's always the bar. When it's so novel and complex to people, there was a time in the 80s where people were like, if people like me watched *Halt and Catch Fire*, that's very fictionalized. But there was a time when people didn't take all of this for granted, and there had to be an inflection point where people were like, oh, I would never write my own HTML or look at the HTML or think a web browser is alien technology. Now I have a child who has no idea what I'm talking about beyond the obvious I'm so old things. It's so ubiquitous. And for me, that is the industry has adopted it. But that's a very personal take.
Yeah. No, that's a really good way of thinking about it. So when you're, what's some of the strangest reactions you would get when you were talking about when someone was first learning about OSCAL?
The strangest reaction, I don't know. It's a good question. A lot of people would ask about it. I mean, to be respectful, and I'm not perfect. I make lots of mistakes. A lot of my cybersecurity experience could be summarized later in questions of how badly did AJ mess things up by not paying attention or not reading the checklist he wrote. This is why I'm a believer in checklists. A lot of people would ask questions of it, having heard someone market it and have no idea what it is. And the question made it clear. I don't have a tangible example, but I'm not here to hate. I used to go roll into open source communities on what do the old people used to call it? IRC? No one knows that anymore, right? We have all these other things. And just ask to the other people asinine questions. If you want to build a community, you can't just say, that's stupid. You have to be like, well, okay, that's not really what it is, but why don't you tell me what are you doing that motivates that question? Why do you want to know? I don't have a good example of that.
Yeah.
The other questions are so nerdy and a GitHub issue for developers. I'm not going to further derail the 3 piece of people that have listened to this to 2 or 1. If you could track, we'll get deeper and deeper in, and then people will stop listening. So
yeah. No, well, who knows, man? We get some nerds on here that we have. I mean, the good news is that we have a couple followers on this podcast. Homeschool Boy 11 recently subscribed, and so, I mean, that's when we knew we
Here's
made
to
it.
you, Homeschool Boy 11.
You're washing down your...
No, this is seltzer water. I basically live on coffee, seltzer water, and email notifications. That's how you feel. If I were a government engineer in the civil service and we could turn that to a Tamagotchi, you would have give AJ coffee, give AJ water, give AJ GitHub notifications, and that's basically how I would survive.
Dude, that's awesome. That's your dopamine. Me too. I got a ton of Mountain Dew right here. I love
nice.
Some. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of...
I love you have followers. I was worried because also shout out to the other people. There are people in the community I've talked to recently, or it's been a long time, I actually tried listening to Brandt Keller. I tried listening to Rob Sherwood. These are people I used to talk to frequently. It was exciting because I know you had a podcast. So I tried to be like, what is this going to be like? And I was like, wow, I guess I should get read up on what OSCAL community is doing by listening to the other guests from Kenny. And then I can like torture those people when I disagree with what they like because they put it in the public to be funny about it.
I think it's pretty safe. It's very likely that no one is listening. So we can.
I mean, I liked it. It is actually really. I didn't get to Rob's yet, but I will. I really liked hearing the perspectives of people. Like I was actually exercising. Was it like yesterday or this morning? And like listening to Brandt say, like, I'm into this because like I'm here to reduce pain. Like every time I feel pain, that's why I automate. I mean, like we've all seen the XKCD about that, but I was like, there were some certain detailed points around that I enjoyed. I'm a big believer in listening to technical podcasts and funny podcasts. That's just not embarrassing enough to be an answer to the previous question.
Right.
I spend a lot of time listening to cyber and IT podcasts. I love hearing interviews with like devs. That's actually what got me into even knowing what the bill of materials or certain open source projects were in NIST like 10 years ago. It was hearing a Floss Weekly episode with Steve Springett. And he's like, I talk to people at NTIA, and I never even heard of them. And I was like, what is that? Now I know it's another part of commerce. But I'm a big lover of podcasts.
Yeah, me too. Me too. What are some good ones? So you mentioned a couple of them. The ones that
Floss Weekly's old school. Security Now I don't listen to as much, but I probably should. I'm a big fan of security, cryptography, whatever. Thomas Tachek, if you're listening, I probably butchered your last name, but I've been trying to meet you in real life for years because we once had an email when I was like at a cyber boot camp, and I wanted you to come talk about how you hate CISSP. Still waiting to meet you. So he and two other people had like people I listen to and work with in the Internet Engineering Task Force, like volunteers, talk about their standards. And like Eker is this person who's been doing standards and worked at Mozilla for years. They had a great interview with him that actually is like about work I do. So I was like shocked. I'm trying Darknet Diaries, I think is the best made podcast I've ever listened to. Jackery Arsider is like my hero. And I've like tried friending him on social media and sending emails. I'm like, my dream is one day to be as well presented or presentable as you are in the public. There are probably others. I could go on and then further sidetrack the quest of getting AJ to answer a question succinctly. But I listen to a lot of them.
No, man. No, you're good. I love it. We suck so bad at this, and we're getting a little bit better. And, we just knew that we needed to just try. And, by the time we get to episode 1010, I think by then, I'll come up to speed with my interviewees, right? At some point.
I mean,
right?
I'm like, you would think that, I mean, I don't think this podcast is just about GRC engineering, but like the space of people that would be interested in being an input to this podcast or listening to it, you've had an impressive number of guests already. And that's not to be funny and be like, oh, AJ, thanks for the reverse compliment there. The cyber space is so odd in that like there are actually now so many podcasts in different verticals. There's a little bit of overlap, but I'm impressed how many interviews you can do on niche topics and make the scope very, very small. Like the security, cryptography, whatever people are almost a totally different topic from what you do. And all of you could have guests stacked forward in the future for years. It's great.
Right. No, I agree. It's incredible. And, there's a lot of friction in security just generally. It's so hard, right? It is so hard. And, there's reasons why, like you're in the U.S. Army and you have to manually click on things and you have to use EMAS, and it's just such a dark place, right? And I feel like really tied to our mission, which is like, let's free the captives. Let's make it a lot easier.
That's your business slogan or the podcast slogan. It's let's free the captives. That must be very fun to explain in a slide deck, by the way. Are you the captives or am I the captives? Yeah.
That's right. I mean, we all, I just felt like some days you're in a really dark place right? It just sucks, right? And
Yeah.
so I want it to be a little bit better, right? So that you can like have the human experience that doesn't suck, right?
I mean, a lot of security is, again, like other things. Like, we don't really, as an industry or like an expertise in an industry, like security doesn't really exist by itself. If you don't have a system, the most secure system, right? People joke, is the one that doesn't exist or basically has no functionality. If you have that, you don't need security. Security can't exist in like system, information, cloud, network. There are all these insert noun security, just like there's like as code is like has a nouns in front of it now. That's like the new hotness. Um, like it can't exist in a vacuum. We don't really look at safety, like industrial safety, or like medical safety, virology, as these other disciplines we can learn from. But a lot of it is learning to manage some amount of input and output, and often in crisis mode. Like, the easiest way that you can torture security people is to just, and like, we do this voluntarily as human beings, whether you're a security engineer or not. Again, people tell you, the industry, we need more people. If I didn't encourage you from the consistent organizational principle of this interview, where Kenny tries to ask me questions and I stay on topic, anyone can make it in the industry, even me. Like,
I love it, dude.
yeah,
Kindred
like,
spirits, man.
But that's like I ironically at that point it felt so necessary to make that joke. I almost lost my train of thought, right? But we overwhelm ourselves with information. The easiest way for a poorly or completely automated solution, you can't get humans out of the loop entirely. I know many people believe that, and like, I know Gen AI has convinced some people, I'm not one of them, that that's like happening next week. But the easiest way that you can demoralize people and keep them not being able to take control back of a system that's like failing is to basically just overwhelm them with information all the time, right? So alert fatigue, people in the industry hear that as like the most concrete example, but it's not always just alerts. That's just like the obvious example of it. And so I feel that all the time. It's like, how can you manage, my sense of humor is probably beyond checklist my best defense to actually being able to do my job, because there are many times that it's sad or angering, and if you don't have a sense of humor about it, your time at your current cyber job or like your career is going to be very short-lived, because you're going to have to find an outlet, and it's not going to be, let's continue working in cybersecurity.
I freaking love that, dude, so much. Yeah. So, all right, man. So let's get another hot take.
Okay. I clearly have none. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So, an emerging threat in cybersecurity that you think people are massively underestimating.
Oh man.
One.
Okay, it has to be a hot take. I can't, like, I was going to jokingly tell you that it was people knowing your system better than you do, and you're like paid to know it. But I don't think that's really emerging. That's like forever.
Yeah. Well, people still underestimate that. So maybe it's not emerging.
Yeah. I think, again,
right.
like, no, actually, this is actually, and not even that shocking. I think it's come up again because of like, I can't remember, was it like, I can't remember the APT that was like teenagers who were apparently the scariest people in the world. Unofficially, personal opinion, very impressed. I feel like that sets the tone for why we should be worried as a society. Those people were the most impactfully negative threat actor, and it was like a 17-year-old and his friends on Discord getting spicy. That should worry you. But like, the fact that they figured out that notifications from multi-factor pop up could overwhelm people so bad they would play games where they would like lace it in. I'm very careful, and like, a lot of exploits are around even like the most secure end-to-end messaging apps. I'm a big fan of them, and like, some more than others. I've mentioned I use Signal. Again, government employee, everything I say is not an endorsement. I just happen to use it. That doesn't mean they're completely safe. And so the scariest things to me are reading almost all public intelligence, open source intelligence, on what someone can send to a cell phone with even the state-of-the-art apps, and do things to your phone that you don't intend. So like, I'm a person that, one, because of the first example I cited as emerging threat, I'm very careful what apps I let pop up notifications in my face, even one or two. And two, I tamper down even the apps that are supposed to be secure enough and make them not so friendly to me, because anything that I can lazily do when I'm not paying attention is a threat to me, whether I'm a government employee or one of my family members. Like, you pressing a button these days can actually mess you up. So I put friction in my own life, so I have to think about pressing buttons, which is an ironic full circle comment for a hot take about emerging threats from a cybersecurity expert who tells others how to do it. I have to protect me from myself.
Yeah.
Which is, again, not emerging. That's evergreen.
There's everything, right? There's the QR, like everything seems to be some sort of smishing, phishing. What's the quishing? That's the cringiest name. The QR one.
Is that QR? So it's funny because I spend most of my time at work. I get to volunteer in the Internet Engineering Task Force, and there's a lot of focus. So there isn't an official group of people working on this yet, but like in IETF speak, and IETF is a great place. No one's ever going to agree with you 100% of the time, but someone explained it to me. They'll know who they are. They won't like me naming them. That you come to IETF to build standards, like the minimal viable thing, and you will get punched in the face metaphorically, because people are going to help you make the best, like the most minimally elegant but most secure thing you can that's standard. And so there are people in IETF that are talking about in the future building digital emblems. So if you look up DIEM, they're not doing it yet, but they're talking about how can we do the digital equivalent of a Red Cross logo on digital infrastructure, or like computers being moved in the real world. So hypothetically, when people are moving them through war zones, people can verify that that box or that computer in the real world belongs to an organization. So you have to do something to make QR codes more resilient. Just looking at the picture and going, oh, Steve at governmentagency.nato.int, because I'm not going to pick a real government agency. I don't think that's a real address, and I was really a hypothetical. Like, that's not good enough. So people are actually thinking about that problem. So quishing and these are things that like people are trying to figure out solutions to. The fact that they don't have answers, but they want to come up with an answer sooner rather than later, is why I'm very careful with what I install on my phone and what I press. I'm also suspicious, like when people do conferences, I'm actually amused and think people should do research on how many times you can get people, given not their demographic background of what they look like and where they grew up and like how old they are. I would love to be able to know full information every conference about someone's employment history and how long it takes them to actually use a QR code and how frequently, and if like their jobs and their experience changes how long it takes them or how little they stop doing it. Like, I would love to see that, but that's like too much money for a research project. That's like a little intensive.
Oh man, dude, AJ, I could go on and on, man. We gotta.
I'm just gonna have to work later at night. You want to do 4 hours? Let's go. It'll be the most tedious episode today. People will be like, the episode to question all future episodes.
We got to do it again.
Sure.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate you. And tell us a little bit more. Like, well, I guess you work for the government, so it's not going to be like, hey, where can we find more about your?
You can find more about my employer at www.nist.gov. That's NIST. We're the helpful standards, folks. Now, I joke, and I'm going to get in trouble. I've wanted to pitch that slogan and get in trouble with Ace Hardware for a long time, but that's not our official slogan. I have a GitHub page where I talk about my work plans over a quarter or a part of a year. Like, a lot of you probably have perf plans in your jobs. I and many federal employees have them. I actually make mine a GitHub repo that I'm going to update today, probably. And I have if you go to github.com/AJ-Stein-NIST, you can see almost everything I do in the Internet Engineering Task Force, in various standards in there that are emerging, in OASIS, in NIST repos. I got all kinds of scenes. I'm very much an open book. Transparency is something I care about, and I try to live it out. So open issues, if you really insist and you want to hear. I even have a repo where you can read my stuff and you can be like, AJ, I got a question. So far, no one's used it, but some people do remember my GitHub profile picture, like, oh, you're the guy with the weird cat picture. But yes, that's me. I changed the picture. Unfortunately, the cat's no longer with us. I missed the cat. It made me sad. My partner was devastated. But that sad looking dude in the picture, you'll notice he looks surprisingly like me. It's the same person.
AJ, thanks so much for joining. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Yeah. All right. Enjoy Jersey.
Thank you, sir. Enjoy Utah, right? You're there right now?
It's great. It's great.
Fun fact, I studied Arabic in high school in Utah, in Salt Lake City, at UU, up in the mountains. Still one of the prettiest places I've ever hung out. It was like, I was one of 2 high school students and a bunch of college people that came from around the United States to study Arabic, Hebrew, and a bunch of languages there. So even I can admit Salt Lake City is great.
I love it.
So yeah.
Thanks, my man. Take care.
No worries.
We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.